Sophie didn't just smirk. She snatched the boarding pass right out of Maya Daniels's hand. The moment was loud and deliberate. 2A, this seat? Sophie scoffed, flipping the ticket like it might be counterfeit. Are you sure this isn't a misprint? Before Maya could reply, the flight attendant turned her head and spoke loud enough for the entire first-class cabin. Can someone check if they started running sweepstakes for first class? I think we've got a winner right here. Someone chuckled. 2 others turned their heads. One man behind Maya let out a low whistle, like he was watching a car crash. Maya didn't flinch. She just stood still, composed, silent. This seat wasn't meant for your kind, Sophie said next, her voice a velvet blade. And that was it. The switch flipped. The temperature in the cabin dropped. You could feel the judgment, not just from Sophie, but from the other passengers, from the way they avoided her eyes or leaned subtly away. The woman in 3B raised an eyebrow. The man across the aisle adjusted his jacket like Maya's presence was somehow contagious. Sophie leaned in a little closer, her lips barely moving now, but the venom sharp. Look, we can sort this out quickly. There's a perfectly decent spot in economy. You won't be uncomfortable, and frankly, she glanced at Maya's tailored charcoal blazer. You'll fit in better. Maya breathed in through her nose. The plane hadn't even left the gate yet, and here she was, being sized up and thrown out like a broken suitcase. Not because she was rude, not because she didn't belong, but because Sophie had looked her up and down and decided her skin, her clothes, and her silence didn't fit the upholstery. Maya looked at the boarding pass Sophie still held. I'd like that back, she said calmly. Sophie hesitated, then smacked it lightly against Maya's palm. Sure, sweetheart. Enjoy your stay. She turned and walked off, her heels clicking down the aisle. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you've ever witnessed someone getting publicly humiliated like this, did you speak up or sit in silence? Maya stepped forward and slid quietly into seat 2A. She didn't fumble with the buckle. She didn't sigh or shake her head. She just folded her blazer, placed her tote neatly beneath the seat, and crossed her legs at the ankle. Her face didn't show it. But inside, she was on fire. Not the kind that burns hot and wild. The kind that smolders, slow, cold, and exact. Because here's what no one in that cabin knew. Not the man sipping bourbon in 1C, not the woman pretending to read a magazine in 2B, and definitely not Sophie. Maya Daniels wasn't just a random black woman in an ill-fitting suit. She was the lead developer of the Flight Crew Behavior Evaluation System, FBES. An encrypted, internationally recognized system designed to anonymously assess in-flight service, bias behavior, and cultural competence across the global aviation industry. A system used by over 27 international airlines. A system Maya had designed, calibrated, and still oversaw from her modest condo in Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from Embassy Row. And today, she was flying in observer mode. No clipboard, no badge, no announcement. Just her and her memory. Because FBES didn't need apps or surveys. It needed moments like these. Sophie had just given her a goldmine of data, in full view of 14 passengers and 3 crew members. It was barely 9:05 a.m. About 10 minutes later, the cabin had quieted. People were settling in. A man in a navy suit was struggling to explain something to the crew about a special meal order. Maya listened. It wasn't English. Portuguese. The young flight attendant next to him blinked, clearly confused. I'm sorry, sir. Do you speak English? Sim, mas, the man replied, gesturing to a document. His accent was thick, but his tone was kind. The attendant was clearly flustered. Sophie appeared again, arms crossed. What's the issue now? Before she could roll her eyes for the second time that hour, Maya stood up, smooth, silent. She walked over and spoke, softly but confidently. Com licença. Ele está perguntando sobre sua refeição especial. Parece que houve erro na reserva. Posso ajudar? The man lit up. The tension disappeared. And the other passengers? They stared. Maya gave the attendant a quick explanation, still in Portuguese. Then she turned to a couple nearby trying to fill out customs forms and gently shifted to French. A minute later, she answered a woman's question about terminal transfers in German. By the time Maya sat down again, she'd spoken 4 languages in 3 minutes. Sophie didn't say a word this time, just stared and walked away. When the beverage cart finally came around, the attendant from earlier, Carrie, looked nervous. "Would you like anything to drink?" she asked. "Ginger ale, please," Maya said, then added, in perfect Arabic, "And thank you for treating me like a human being." Carrie blinked. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Maya smiled, took her drink, and returned to her notebook. The pen moved slowly. Each word mattered. Back in the galley, Sophie was fuming. "She's trying to show off," she hissed. "What is this, a TED Talk?" Carrie stayed quiet. She didn't agree, but she wasn't about to argue. Sophie paced. "I swear I'm going to talk to the supervisor when we land. This whole thing feels off." But what was really off was the growing silence around Sophie, the quiet glances, the unease. Because the more Maya Daniels didn't speak, the more her presence echoed. As the flight climbed through 20,000 feet, Maya reclined her seat slightly, eyes on the clouds outside. She wasn't angry. She was focused. In 2 hours, when they landed in Zurich, she'd walk straight into a closed-door meeting with the Skynova International Standards Board, the very group that helped fund the FBS pilot program. And she wouldn't have to say a single negative word about Sophie. Because the behavior? It spoke for itself. And her report? It had already begun writing itself, starting from the moment someone grabbed her boarding pass and held it in the air like a joke. By the time Sophie realized who Maya really was, it would be far too late. The flight had leveled out somewhere over the Atlantic. The cabin lights dimmed. The murmur of conversation settled into a quiet hum, the kind you'd hear in a library, only with the occasional clink of a champagne glass. Maya Daniels sat in 2A, legs crossed, a blanket tucked around her knees. She hadn't touched the welcome drink. Instead, she'd been quietly writing in a slim, black leather notebook balanced on the tray table. Names, phrases, timing, observations. Nothing accusatory, just facts. Every behavior had a timestamp, every comment logged, not for revenge, for record. She paused for a moment and looked out the window. Clouds rolled like waves beneath them, glowing silver under the sun. Peaceful, too peaceful for what had just happened. She closed the notebook softly. That's when the man from across the aisle leaned in. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and a Swiss passport sticking out of his jacket pocket. His voice was kind, but uncertain. "Excuse me, do you speak French?" Maya turned toward him and smiled. "Oui, bien sûr. Que puis-je faire pour vous?" His face lit up with relief. "Merci. I've been trying to figure out these landing forms. They're only in English and German." Maya nodded, took the card from his hand, and gently walked him through the sections, explaining everything in clear, patient French. As she did, a woman in the next row leaned in with a question of her own. This time, it was in Spanish. Maya answered without skipping a beat. 2 rows back, someone called out a phrase in Italian, something about arrival times in Zurich. Maya turned slightly in her seat and responded effortlessly. The cabin, which had been still and hushed, began to buzz again, but this time with a new kind of energy. People were watching her, really watching, not like before, not through the lens of suspicion or judgment, but something else, recognition and curiosity. Who was this woman? In the galley, Sophie stood stiffly beside the drink cart, listening in. She'd heard the shift in tone from the cabin, heard the languages, and it irritated her more than she cared to admit. "She's not even staff," Sophie muttered under her breath. Why is she talking to so many people? Carrie, the younger flight attendant, kept quiet as she filled another tray with sparkling water. She's just helping, Carrie finally said softly. Helping? Sophie scoffed. She's grandstanding, probably trying to make a scene so she can write some blog post about how brave she is. Carrie looked down. She didn't agree, but she wasn't going to fight it. Not yet. Back in her seat, Maya tucked away her notebook. It wasn't even halfway through the flight, and she'd already assisted 7 passengers in 5 languages. Quietly. Seamlessly. This wasn't her first time doing this, but it might be the first time someone like Sophie would feel the consequences. Not because Maya yelled, but because Maya documented. And in her world, documentation was power. The man across from her leaned in again, more casual now. You're incredible, he said in English. Accent thick but sincere. Are you a diplomat? Maya smiled. No. Translator then? Interpreter? She shook her head. Just observant. He gave her a puzzled look, but didn't press. Another hour passed. Flight attendants began serving the pre-landing meal. Small trays with warm bread, a simple chicken or vegetarian option, and small bottles of wine. When Sophie reached Maya's row, she paused. Her smile was mechanical. Chicken or vegetarian? Maya met her gaze. Chicken, please. As Sophie set down the tray, she noticed the black notebook now sitting closed at Maya's side. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You taking notes on the food too? She asked, tight-lipped. Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Sophie let the silence hang for a beat too long, then moved on. Her cheeks flushed. Later, somewhere near the coast of Portugal, the first officer stepped out of the cockpit to stretch his legs. He chatted briefly with a few passengers, shaking hands with someone from the back of the plane. When he reached Maya's row, he paused. The older Swiss man in 2B greeted him in French, and then gestured toward Maya. This woman saved us all, he said, chuckling. She speaks everyone's language. The first officer raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Maya smiled politely, saying nothing. Mind if I ask where you're from? He asked, friendly. Washington, D.C. And what do you do? I work in global systems. He tilted his head. Government? Independent. It was vague enough to deflect, but truthful. Well, he said, smiling. Thanks for keeping the peace. As he turned to walk back, he added under his breath. Some of us up front noticed earlier. What happened? Just wanted to say, we see it. Doesn't sit right. Maya nodded slowly. Thank you. A few rows back, Carrie watched the whole exchange, and she noticed something Sophie didn't. The energy in the cabin had shifted. People weren't just tolerating Maya now. They were respecting her, leaning in. And Sophie? Sophie was shrinking, not obviously, but undeniably. About 40 minutes before landing, Maya opened her notebook once more. She logged a final note. Phase 1, passive language observation, complete. Direct cultural insult, recorded. Behavior escalation, mockery plus physical disrespect. Peer passivity, 4 observed, 1 intervention, Carrie. Language engagement, 9 passengers, 6 dialects. Crew perception shift. Initiated, she closed the notebook and slipped it into her bag. It would be uploaded to the FBES system within the hour, tagged under Skynova Flight 717, Zurich route evaluation. The system would flag the interaction. A third party would review the footage silently captured from the in-cabin camera angles, standard on long-haul flights. But the data? The data was already enough. As the captain announced their descent into Zurich, Maya looked around the cabin one last time. People were gathering their belongings, finishing drinks, fastening belts. But a few still glanced her way, not with curiosity, with respect, with the quiet kind of awe that happens when someone breaks a pattern without raising their voice. Carrie passed by once more with a trash bag. She paused, then said quietly, "Thank you for today." Maya looked up. "For what?" "For being better than all of us." Maya smiled gently. "No, for showing us we can be better." And far in the front, near the galley, Sophie stood with arms crossed, watching the seatbelt sign blink on. She didn't say a word, but her jaw was tight, because for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she was the one in control anymore. The cabin lights glowed amber as Flight 717 began its slow descent over the Swiss Alps. Through the window, Maya could see streaks of cloud brushing the snow-tipped mountains, sharp, quiet giants holding up the sky. She closed her eyes for a second. The past few hours had been telling. Passengers who'd looked past her now looked twice. A young couple from Argentina had quietly asked for her help filling out their customs card in Spanish. A Nigerian businessman had leaned over with a customs declaration question in French. And a woman traveling alone from Munich had whispered, "Thank you," in German, before slipping Maya a wrapped chocolate bar. Still, Maya hadn't said much more. Her fluency spoke louder than anything she could say. And yet, she felt the eyes again. From the front, from the cockpit door. It happened just after the captain's second descent announcement. The cockpit door opened briefly, and a tall man in his late 50s stepped out. Neat gray hair, crisp uniform, and the calm energy of someone who'd flown through more turbulence than most people had lived through. Captain Owen Halbrook. He made his usual check-in with the lead flight attendant near the galley, then paused, glancing toward the cabin. That's when he saw her, and paused. Maya was helping the Swiss man across the aisle close his overpacked carry-on. The captain raised an eyebrow. He leaned in to speak with the co-pilot, then nodded once toward Sophie, who was busy wiping down a service tray. "Who's that in 2A?" he asked, low. Sophie didn't even glance over. "Oh, her?" she said, casual. "No one. Just a loud first-class guest who thinks she's a flight app." Halbrook frowned. "I've heard her speak 5 languages in the past hour. Who exactly is she?" Sophie shrugged. "I didn't catch her name. She's not VIP or crew. Probably someone from a charity upgrade." That didn't sit right with Halbrook. He'd been flying for 30 years. He'd seen people try to act important before, but this was different. There was a precision to how Maya carried herself. No ego, just fluency and presence. He turned to his co-pilot. "I want to speak to her." Less than a minute later, the cabin phone rang. Carrie walked over to Maya's seat, a little hesitant. "Ms. Daniels, the captain would like a quick word with you in the cockpit, if you're comfortable." Maya blinked. She hadn't expected that. "Now?" she asked, careful not to sound alarmed. "Yes, ma'am. Just a moment. Nothing serious." Maya nodded, stood, and followed Carrie to the front. As the cockpit door slid open, the quiet changed. Inside, it was cooler, sharper, filled with hums and blinking green panels. The co-pilot gave a polite nod and stepped slightly aside. Captain Halbrook turned from his seat. "Ms. Daniels," he said warmly, offering his hand. "Thank you for coming." She shook it. "Captain, I just wanted to say," he gestured toward the passenger cabin. "That was impressive. I've never seen someone switch across so many languages so effortlessly. You made our job easier today." Maya gave a quiet smile. "Glad I could help." There was a pause. "If you don't mind me asking, are you in aviation?" he asked. Maya tilted her head. "In a way." "Airline rep? Diplomat? Consultant?" "Independent," she replied. The captain chuckled softly. "You folks always say that." She didn't elaborate, just kept her gaze level. "I only ask because, well, a few of the crew had concerns earlier about a situation before takeoff." She said nothing, just waited. "I wasn't there," he continued, "but I believe in handling things directly and fairly. So if anything made you uncomfortable today, I'd like to hear it." Maya nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Captain, but I don't need an apology." He looked surprised. I don't even need a correction, she added. Then, what do you need? She looked out through the windshield at the sky opening up ahead. I just need people to pay attention. That's all. Her voice was even. Not angry, not soft, just clear. Captain Halbrook studied her, and for a moment, he didn't see a passenger. He saw an operator, a strategist, a woman with the kind of calm you only earn from years of being underestimated and learning to use it. I'm guessing, he said finally. You've got some kind of credentials you're not telling me. Maya smiled faintly. I guess you could say. I write the rules most people think only apply to others. That made the co-pilot blink. The captain nodded slowly. Well, I'm grateful for how you handled it. Not everyone could have kept their cool. It wasn't personal, she said. Just predictable. She took one last look around the cockpit. You run a good ship, Captain. And with that, she turned to leave. But Halbrook called after her. Ms. Daniels? She paused at the door. If you're ever on Sky Nova again, consider this an open door. We could use more eyes like yours. She nodded once. Thank you. Back in the galley, Sophie was wiping down the counter with extra force when Maya passed her. Cockpit tour, huh? She muttered. Maya didn't stop walking, didn't speak, didn't look back. Because she didn't need to. The damage was already done, only not to her. 10 minutes later, the landing gear lowered. Zurich welcomed them with gray skies and soft rain. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Carrie leaned in toward Sophie and said quietly, You know she's not just a guest, right? What? Sophie snapped. I looked at her tag when she stood up earlier. Daniels, Maya A. Sophie blinked. So? You don't read the IATA bulletins? Sophie stared. She's on the advisory board. Advisory for what? Carrie leaned in closer. International behavior compliance, passenger rights enforcement, global crew audit systems. Sophie's face went white. Wait, you're saying she's… Carrie didn't answer. She just walked away. Maya exited the jet bridge calmly, umbrella in hand. She didn't rush. She didn't look behind her. And as she stepped onto the concourse, her phone buzzed with an automated prompt from her own system. Ready to upload Flight 717, Sky Nova crew observation? Confirm. Y1, and she smiled, pressed Y, and disappeared into the crowd. Zurich greeted them with light rain and a polite kind of cold, the kind that didn't bite, just reminded you to keep moving. Maya Daniels stepped off the jet bridge with the ease of someone who'd been through this 1,000 times. She moved like mist, quiet, precise, hard to hold on to. She didn't look back at the plane. Didn't need to. Inside her coat pocket, her phone buzzed. No ringtone, no vibration pattern, just one long pulse. Her system's way of asking, upload flight crew behavior evaluation, Flight 717, Sky Nova Airlines, JFK. ZRH Observer, Daniels, M.A. Confirm Y.N. She didn't hesitate. Tapped Y. That was all. One touch. No calls, no drama. Just data. But what Sophie didn't know, what most airlines didn't fully grasp yet, was that Maya's system didn't just log behavior. It flagged patterns. It scored incidents. And when thresholds were crossed, it triggered alerts to 3 different international regulatory agencies, to corporate boards, to partner airlines, and sometimes, quietly, to the airline's own internal audit teams. Maya had built the FBES system for moments like this. No shouting, no camera phones, no confrontation in the aisle. Just truth. Undeniable. Unfiltered. Unavoidable. By the time Maya made it through customs, the wheels were already turning. At the Sky Nova European office, 10 floors above a Zurich train station, a red alert pinged the inbox of the chief compliance officer. Subject line, incident flagged. Flight 717, Daniels report, Tier 1 status. Within minutes, A notification was escalated to the VP of International Training, the Director of Crew Performance, and quietly, the Board Liaison for Global Operations. Names weren't public. Not yet. But the system had logged. Sophie Landon, lead cabin attendant behavior, tag. Targeted derision incident level, 4.3.2. Public humiliation of passenger based on perceived socioeconomic status. Supporting tags, 4.4.7. Cultural bias, 4.6.1. Insubordination to rank authority, implied. Severity score, 9.1. 10 threshold for investigation, 6.0. Sophie had no idea. Meanwhile, Maya checked into a small hotel just off Bahnhofstrasse. Nothing flashy, but with strong espresso and quiet hallways. She set down her bag, removed her coat, and poured herself a glass of still water. She didn't smile, didn't sigh, just sat down, pulled out her notebook, and logged one final note. Auditor presence still undetectable. Bias still assumed safe in uniform. But the tide is turning. She folded the cover shut. Let the silence do the rest. Back at Sky Nova HQ in New York, a junior HR analyst received an automatic compliance alert labeled Flagged Behavior, International Route. She'd never seen the system escalate so quickly. Her supervisor stepped in. What flight? 717. JFK to Zurich, first-class cabin. The supervisor scrolled through the summary and froze when she saw the auditor ID. Maya Daniels? You know her? He nodded slowly. She designed the compliance metrics that built this department. At the same moment, Sophie was still on the tarmac, overseeing cleanup. Her shift wasn't done yet. She hadn't noticed the change in tone from the other attendants. Hadn't seen the way the captain avoided eye contact. Hadn't realized Carrie had quietly submitted her own internal note citing concerns about professionalism. Sophie thought she was in the clear, until the call came in. Crew Lead Landon, please report to Zurich Flight Operations, Room 4B. No explanation, no warning, just a location. Sophie frowned but obeyed. Maya, meanwhile, was walking the cobblestone streets of the old city, umbrella in hand, blending in like any other tourist. No one would know she had just changed someone's entire career path with a single upload. And she preferred it that way. Her work wasn't about public shame. It was about systemic accountability. Sophie's mistake wasn't just rudeness. It was confidence in impunity, the belief that some uniforms made cruelty safe. That belief would be dismantled now, piece by piece. And not by shouting, by scorecards, by systems, by structure. The next morning, a global crew bulletin went out to all Sky Nova flight staff. As part of our ongoing commitment to inclusive service standards and international passenger dignity, all crew will now undergo quarterly behavior calibration reviews, effective immediately. This includes randomized auditor presence and expanded feedback scoring models across premium cabins. It was signed, Maya A. Daniels, IATA Oversight Partner and Lead Architect, FBES Compliance Division. Sophie read it in a break room in Zurich, coffee growing cold in her hand. She didn't move for a long time. She didn't have to. The message was already loud and clear. Zurich, 7:22 a.m., rain tapping glass like distant applause. Maya Daniels sat in the corner booth of a cafe tucked behind the IATA regional building. Double espresso in front of her, laptop open, cursor blinking. To anyone else, she looked like a traveler checking emails before a meeting. But to the system she'd built, she was inputting the final layer of a comprehensive behavioral incident report. Flight Crew Behavior Evaluation Report, Flight 717, Sky Nova. Observer ID. Daniels, Maya A. Submission. Final score, 9.110. Tier 1 violation triggered. Flagged subjects. Landon, Sophie, lead cabin attendant. Supporting, crew, Carrie M. Neutral. Halbrook, Owen, supportive witness. She didn't embellish, didn't editorialize, just the facts. The tone Sophie used, the moment the boarding pass was taken, the passive-aggressive sarcasm, the shift in tone when foreign languages began. All of it time-stamped. Neutral, cold, professional. Once she hit submit, the report fed into 3 systems simultaneously. Sky Nova Internal Ethics Portal, IATA, Global Crew Oversight System, Partner, Airlines Shared Crew Evaluation Network, SCEN. Within minutes, Sophie Landon's name would be flagged in 6 different airline databases, and the incident would be non-erasable. Back at Zurich Airport's Flight Operations Office, Sophie adjusted the cuffs on her blazer, still unaware. She'd been summoned for a routine debrief, which didn't make sense. She'd done at least 50 transatlantic flights. Debriefs weren't scheduled unless something was off. As she entered room 4B, she noticed a woman she didn't recognize. Mid-40s, sharp suit, no uniform. 2 other men sat beside her in neutral blazers. The badge on the table read, Ethics and Compliance Liaison, Sky Nova Europe. That's when Sophie's stomach dropped. Meanwhile, Maya walked across the quiet cobblestone to the IATA building's east wing. She didn't need to speak to anyone. Her presence had already been logged through secure facial ID at the door. As she passed the central security room, one of the technicians nodded. "Good morning, Ms. Daniels." "Morning, Dominic." He paused. "Is this about the JFK Zurich run?" She smiled faintly. "It's always about the pattern, not the incident." He gave a slow nod. "I'll keep the review tags elevated for the next 30 days. "Make it 90, she said. "I have a feeling this isn't isolated." Back in room 4B, Sophie sat stiff-backed while the compliance officer across from her flipped through a slim packet of documents. "Ms. Landon," the officer began, "this is a courtesy meeting before our full investigation begins." "Investigation?" Sophie blinked. "Of what?" "A formal report was submitted through the FBES system regarding your conduct during Flight 717. Sophie's breath caught. "By who?" The officer didn't answer directly. "The report includes third-party verification, crew witness references, and time-stamped behavioral markers." Sophie swallowed hard. This is a misunderstanding. That woman was trying to show off. She was being disruptive." The officer turned a page. "She was recorded assisting 9 passengers in 6 languages." "Exactly. She was interrupting service. Or," the officer said evenly, "she was repairing what you failed to deliver." Silence. "Ms. Landon," he continued, "I suggest you refrain from commentary until the official review board convenes next week. Until then, your international route eligibility is suspended." Sophie's face turned pale. "Suspended? For what? Being a little sarcastic?" "No," the woman beside the officer spoke for the first time. "For being unfit to represent this company on global routes, and for treating a verified observer with arrogance and contempt." That's when it hit her. Observer. Sophie leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. She was a plant. No one confirmed, no one denied. But the silence was louder than any answer. Later that day, Maya sat in a private briefing room with a representative from Sky Nova's executive board. A woman named Anika with silver-rimmed glasses and a calm, polished tone. "Ms. Daniels," she began, "on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your discretion and for your thoroughness." "Thank the system," Maya replied. "I just helped build it." Anika smiled. "Still, it's rare to have real-time feedback with this level of precision." "The data's only part of the picture," Maya said. "It's what you do with it next that matters." "We plan to act accordingly." There was a pause. "You flagged 5 other flights over the past 90 days, Anika added. Maya nodded. "Behavior repeats where impunity breeds. Would you consider coming in to advise our new global crew training division?" Maya paused. "Maybe, but right now, I'm more useful in motion." Anika understood. She extended a hand. "Well, motion or not, the industry needs more of you." Maya shook her hand once. "No, it needs fewer of her." Back in the staff lounge, Carrie sat with her coffee untouched, scrolling through her messages. She'd just received an internal memo. Flight 717. Observer verified, incident confirmed. Route flagged for performance audit. Further staff disclosures welcome. Confidentiality protected. She hesitated, then typed, "I'd like to speak to someone. I saw it happen too." Send. She exhaled. It wasn't courage. It was clarity. By the end of the week, Sophie Landon's name had been quietly removed from the active long-haul roster. No public announcement, no HR blast, just a silent reshuffle, and a reputation that would never fully recover. Meanwhile, Maya boarded her next flight, this time as a silent observer on a different airline, heading to Dubai. Same mission, different names. But the system, it always remembered. And so did she. Sophie Landon had been grounded for 3 days. At first, she convinced herself it was just a scheduling fluke, maybe a crew reshuffle, maybe someone forgot to input her leg assignments. But by the 4th morning, her dashboard still read, "No upcoming flights," and her emails to scheduling went unanswered. That's when the silence stopped feeling normal and started feeling like a warning. The signs were subtle, but undeniable. Her security badge still worked, but now it beeped yellow instead of green at certain doors. The crew lounge, where Sophie once strutted in like she ran the floor, had gone cold. Conversations trailed off when she entered. Colleagues glanced at her, then back at their phones. Carrie, the junior flight attendant who used to hang by her side, now sat with ground crew she'd barely spoken to before. When Sophie waved, Carrie pretended not to see, and then came the text. From someone in ops. Just 4 words. Class 4, audit. Be careful. Her stomach twisted. Across town, Maya Daniels sat in a quiet conference room overlooking Lake Zurich, her laptop open to the flight crew behavior evaluation system dashboard. She sipped green tea, her eyes moving calmly across the screen. Subject, Landon, Sophie. Flight 717. Status, Tier 1 violation. Active flag escalation phase. 2 of 3. Phase 3 meant permanent interline red flagging, which meant no long-haul assignments, no international rotations, no cross-partner access. In airline terms, career exile. And the most devastating part? Maya hadn't raised her voice, not once. She hadn't filed a complaint or spoken to the press. She had simply observed, documented, submitted. And now the system was doing what it was designed to do. Hold people accountable, quietly. At Zurich Airport's flight ops office, Sophie received a notification. Mandatory, crew recalibration session, Terminal C, room 208, dress code, standard uniform only. No pins, no stripes, no rank indicators. Time, 08 Huzunwar. No pins, no stripes, no status. They were flattening her, symbolically and literally. Sophie's jaw clenched. She tapped the notification, but there was no reply option. Just a message at the bottom. Attendance confirmed. The next morning, she arrived sharp at 7:55. Hair tight, posture straighter than usual, smile perfectly neutral. But when she stepped into room 208, the air changed. 12 other uniformed crew members were already seated, all of them stripped of rank, just like her. Some she recognized, some didn't look up. At the front of the room stood a man in a gray blazer with no name tag, no airline logo, just a clipboard. "Good morning," he said, his tone almost too calm. "This is your recalibration session. You've been selected due to behavioral flags detected through FBES on your recent routes." Someone scoffed in the back. "That system is a joke." The facilitator didn't blink. FBES is not a survey or an algorithm. It is an observer-led compliance framework embedded in international aviation policy. Sophie raised a hand, tone sharp. "And who's behind it? Observer identities are protected, per IATA's confidentiality agreement, Section 7C. So, what? We're just being secretly graded now? "No," he said evenly. "You're being transparently held accountable." Silence fell again. But it wasn't just awkward. It was heavy, like everyone could feel the invisible presence of the person who had done this, and none of them knew who she was. At that very moment, Maya was boarding a different flight. Same mission, new airline, different crew. She moved through the terminal with no badge, no title, no name anyone recognized. Just her tote bag, her notebook, and her silence. As she stepped onto the plane, a man in business class was berating a woman in a hijab over the overhead bin. Maya didn't intervene. She didn't lecture. She didn't even frown. She watched, took a mental note, and sat down. Back in Zurich, Carrie received a message from HR. Optional submission, additional input, Flight 717 incident. Your feedback remains confidential. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then began to type. I was there. I saw what happened. Ms. Daniels was respectful. She helped the passengers we couldn't understand. She de-escalated a dozen situations. She spoke at least 5 languages. Sophie mocked her, twice, loudly. She took her boarding pass. She humiliated her in front of a full cabin. I didn't speak up then. I should have. I'm speaking up now. She hit send. Her hands trembled just slightly. Sophie walked out of the recalibration session more lost than angry. They hadn't yelled at her, hadn't threatened her, they hadn't even disciplined her. Not officially. But the message had been devastatingly clear. The system had eyes. The skies were no longer hers to command. She had built her authority on control. The way she stood, the tone she used, the uniforms, and the pins. Now, all of it stripped. And worst of all, the woman who started it, she hadn't even raised her voice, hadn't said her name, hadn't written a complaint. She had just sat there, let the world judge for itself. And it had. 2 hours later, Maya sipped coffee in a departure lounge in Dubai, where she was due to observe a long-haul crew from a different airline. Her phone buzzed quietly with a system update. Subject, Landon Sophie, Tier 1 escalation complete. Crew visibility restricted across. Sky Nova, Air Futura, E-Star, Loomis Air, Nordic Jet. Red level flag active. No fanfare, no headlines, just lines of code. And silence. The kind of silence that told Maya her job was far from over. But this part was done. Monday started with a silence no one could explain. At Sky Nova's Zurich base, crew members filtered into the scheduling office like it was any other day, smiling, chatting, waiting to check in for international assignments. But something felt off. The wall-mounted flight roster screen, normally glowing with rows of crew names and destinations, had been wiped clean. Just one blinking line at the top. System refresh in progress. Please stand by. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then whispers. Did they change the platform? Is this a glitch? Why isn't my name showing up? Across the city, in a sealed office at Sky Nova's Global Operations Hub, 5 executives were staring at a report that had dropped into their inboxes overnight. The subject line was simple. FBES Tier 1 response. Enforcement action now live. The body of the report was not. It listed 9 names. Crew members flagged for multiple flights over the past quarter. But the first name on the list? Landon Sophie, LAD cabin crew, Flight 717. Next to it, status, blacklisted from international rotation, Tier 1 flag, partner access suspended. Effective immediately. No appeals, no delays, no notification to the individual prior to enforcement. That was the agreement the company had signed when they adopted Maya's system, fast-track compliance through external oversight. They had never expected it to be used like this. They had never expected it to come from inside one of their own planes, and they had never imagined it would hit someone like Sophie. At the same moment, Sophie was sitting in the crew cafeteria, sipping lukewarm coffee and scrolling her schedule app on repeat. Still blank. Still locked. She looked up just in time to see 3 names vanish from the crew group chat. Removed from channel. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. Her breath tightened. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an anonymous sender. They pulled 5 names from the entire long-haul roster this morning. No warning. All Tier 1s. You're on the list. Meanwhile, Maya sat at a roundtable conference in Dubai, dressed in a modest gray pantsuit, her nameplate reading only, Mr. Daniels, Independent Compliance Advisor. No title, no company logo, just a name. And by now, it was a name that carried weight. The other panelists were discussing cultural onboarding for international crew. Someone mentioned the FBES system as a recent compliance innovation. Still anonymous, but increasingly influential. Maya just smiled faintly and took notes. She wasn't here for praise. She was here to listen, to calibrate, to prepare for what came next. Because she knew, Tier 1 enforcement was just the beginning. Back in Zurich, Carrie received a push notification. Flight 717 crew evaluation status closed. Blacklist implemented. Statement pending. She opened the crew app and stared at the new entry under Sophie's name. Do not assign to international flight operations. Performance under review. Restricted access. Her stomach sank. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because it was so final. So quiet. So much like Maya. By mid-afternoon, the news started leaking. Not to the press, not to passengers, but internally. Crew members on layovers began texting, screenshots of removed names, links to internal memos with redacted sections, rumors of a ghost passenger triggering the enforcement, and soon a nickname started circulating on Slack channels and backroom WhatsApp groups. The 9-language ghost. Someone who'd flown in silence, spoken in tongues, smiled politely, and left careers in tatters behind her. At headquarters, a senior exec asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. Do we know for certain it was her? The compliance lead replied, We don't have to. The system was built to protect observers. All that matters is the thresholds were passed. And now the industry watches what we do next. That night, Maya checked into a small business hotel in Tokyo. Her next observation leg already queued. She unpacked slowly. Her tablet buzzed with another system update. Sophie Landon, Blacklist status confirmed by SCEN, global notice distributed. SCEN, the shared crew evaluation network, was used by 14 major carriers. And once a name was flagged across the SCEN, it meant one thing. No more flying. Not internationally, not even regionally. Not without retraining, not without full reinstatement hearings. Maya poured a cup of tea and stared at the screen. She didn't feel triumph. She felt closure. For now. Meanwhile, Sophie sat alone in her apartment, phone dark beside her. She hadn't received a single call from leadership, not one message from the union. Just an auto-generated HR notice. Due to the nature of the incident, your active crew privileges have been suspended pending a full evaluation. You will be contacted with next steps if applicable. She threw the phone across the couch. She wanted to scream, but nothing came out. No one to blame, no one to confront, because she still didn't know the woman's name. And that was the worst part. They whispered about her long before they understood who she was. By the end of the week, the crew forums were buzzing. Not on public channels. No, this wasn't the kind of thing anyone said in uniform. But in WhatsApp chats, Signal groups, and Slack DMs labeled things like internal only or what HR doesn't know. Her name, or rather the absence of her name, spread like static electricity in dry air. She didn't file a complaint, just vanished. I heard she was speaking to passengers in like 8 languages. No badge, no business card. Just sat in first class like she owned the sky. And then, boom, Sophie's grounded. permanently. But here's the thing. They still didn't know who she was. Not her title, not her employer, not even what to call her. Some called her the nine-language ghost. Others, the polyglot phantom. But the most common phrase was the simplest, the woman in 2A. Across Skynova's Zurich base, crew members approached their shifts with new caution. There was a visible shift. No more sarcastic jokes near passengers, fewer eye rolls in the galley, and a sudden resurgence in brushing up on basic French, Spanish, and German phrases. The unspoken rule was clear. Anyone could be watching, and if you treat someone like they don't belong, they might be the reason you lose your wings. No one said Maya Daniels' name aloud, but she was everywhere now. In Geneva, during a quarterly leadership summit, a Skynova HR director stood in front of a small breakout group on behavioral compliance. He tapped the screen behind him and said, "One passenger, one flight, that's all it took." He didn't need to say the route number or the name of the crew lead. They all knew. She didn't escalate, didn't raise her voice. She just logged it. A senior manager from the Dubai division raised his hand. "Is it true she spoke to 9 passengers in 6 languages?" The HR lead shrugged. "I wasn't there, but that's what's in the report." "And no one knew?" "She didn't have to be known," the HR director said. "That's the point. If someone needs to announce their authority, they probably don't have any." The room fell quiet. Someone in the back muttered, "Damn." And to think, Sophie used to brag that no one could touch her. In a lounge in Munich, 2 junior attendants traded glances after their gate debrief. "What if we get someone like her on our flight?" "You mean the ghost lady?" "Yeah." One of them pulled out her phone. "Honestly, I bookmarked some French phrases just in case." They both laughed nervously, but underneath, they weren't joking. Back in Tokyo, Maya moved through Hanita's terminal with a linen tote over her shoulder and headphones tucked around her neck. She didn't move like a corporate executive or a high-profile consultant. She moved like someone used to being mistaken for less, someone who preferred it that way. She checked the flight screen, found her gate, and quietly walked to the observation window. From the outside, she looked like any other frequent flyer, but internally, she was reviewing a profile of her next flight, a trans-Pacific route with a crew that had 3 minor flags and 1 borderline behavioral score hovering at 5.9. Threshold was 6.0, 1 incident away. Meanwhile, Carrie sat across from her supervisor in Zurich's crew performance review office. She'd been summoned that morning, not for discipline, but for feedback. "You submitted an internal statement about Flight 717? "Yes, ma'am." The supervisor nodded, tapping her screen. "That was a strong thing to do." Carrie sat straighter. "It was the right thing. The observer didn't name you directly, but your presence on the report was marked neutral with deflection potential." Carrie blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means she saw you and noted that you weren't part of the problem, but you had the chance to be part of the solution." Carrie nodded slowly. The supervisor leaned forward. "So let me ask you, if you could go back, what would you do differently?" Carrie's voice was quiet. "I would have spoken up sooner." "Good. Then let's start now." The supervisor pushed a folder across the table. "We're opening peer leadership training for mid-tier crew. You've been nominated." Carrie looked at the folder. Inside was a document with her name and a heading, Internal Ally Development Program, Cohort Wine. At the bottom, in small, precise font, Program Model. Inspired by Observational Ethics Initiative, Daniels Protocol. She smiled. Small, honest. "She really changed everything, didn't she?" "She didn't change everything," her supervisor said. "She reminded us that it needed changing." Meanwhile, the internal email went out, company-wide. Subject line: Update, Behavioral Compliance and Passenger Interaction Standards. Body: Effective immediately. All flight crew are advised of the following. Observational evaluations may occur without prior notice. Language and cultural respect metrics will carry equal weight as technical service. Crew members found exceeding bias thresholds will be removed from international routes, regardless of seniority. Behavior is no longer assumed neutral. It must be earned. No one needed to read between the lines. They already had. In a terminal in Seoul, a first officer scrolled the message and turned to his captain. "Did you see this?" "Yeah. You think this has to do with that Flight 717 thing?" The captain just nodded. "They don't even know who she is." The first officer shook his head. "They don't have to." At that very moment, Maya sat on a bench outside Gate 32, flipping through her notebook. She paused on a quote she had scribbled from a passenger months ago. A woman in her 70s from Morocco, who'd whispered after Maya had translated a dispute with ground staff. "Thank you. No one's ever spoken to us in our own voice before." Maya tapped her pen against the page. People always asked why she never went public, why she didn't take credit, didn't write op-eds or speak on panels under her full name. But the truth was simple. The louder you are, the faster they learn how to ignore you. Silence, intentional silence, made them listen, because they never saw it coming. And when it hit, there was no way to spin it. Later that night, as Maya boarded her next flight, she passed through the galley as a young male attendant greeted her. "Welcome aboard," he said with a smile. "Seat 2A, yes?" She nodded. As he handed her a bottle of water, he added, just loud enough for her to hear, "If you need anything, Miss Daniels, I speak a little German, decent French, and I'm learning Korean." Maya raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "That's so." He grinned, a little nervous. "Just trying to do better." She nodded slowly, took the water, and said, softly, in perfect Korean, "You're already on the right path." His eyes widened. "And Maya?" She turned down the aisle without another word. Still anonymous, still calm. But now, they didn't even need her name. They just knew. If she was there, they needed to be better. It was a Thursday morning when it landed. At exactly 8:03 a.m. Zurich time, Sky Nova's internal bulletin system pushed a company-wide update to over 6,300 employees worldwide. Subject line: Behavioral Standards Update. Passenger Interaction and Crew Conduct Policy. Directive 4.3.2. No bold letters, no bright red banners, just clean white text on a slate background. And yet, by 8:15, it had been screen captured, forwarded, whispered about, and dissected across lounges, galleys, and crew message boards from Singapore to Seattle. The memo was precise, direct, and cold in a way only corporate policy could be. Effective immediately, any flight crew member assigned to premium cabins will be subject to randomized behavioral auditing through our Observer Compliance Partnership, OCP. Audits may include cross-cultural communication fluency, response to perceived passenger status, body language toward non-English speakers, and documented tone-based interactions. Behavioral patterns flagged at Tier 1 will trigger full blacklisting from international rotations without further warning. Reinstatement requires formal review by the Global Ethics Panel. There will be no advance notice, no specific names disclosed, and no exemption based on tenure, rank, or prior evaluation history. The message was signed, unmistakably and officially, Maya A. Daniels, Independent Compliance Auditor Advisor, FBES Global Program, IATA Oversight Partner. No more mystery, no more whispers. The ghost now had a name, and that name came with teeth. In the break room in Paris, a crew lead put down her coffee mid-sip. "Well, damn," she muttered. A junior attendant glanced over her shoulder. "So, she was real?" "Oh, she's real. And she's the reason Sophie's flying ground shifts now." "Wait, that was her?" The lead didn't answer. She didn't have to. At Sky Nova's New York headquarters, the executive floor was quiet. Too quiet. HR leads huddled behind closed doors. Legal reviewed contract language. and scheduling teams scrambled to adjust rosters as 5 more crew names lit up on the internal risk dashboard, flagged for evaluation urgency. For weeks, people had tried to guess who Maya Daniels really was. Now, they were trying to figure out how to stay out of her way. Meanwhile, Maya sat in a cafe in Madrid, her laptop open, but her eyes watching a family across the room. The mother struggled to order coffee in Spanish. The barista looked annoyed. Maya stood up, walked over, and gently offered help in soft, native Spanish, calm, patient, respectful. The mother blinked, grateful. The barista, embarrassed, muttered an apology. Maya smiled politely and returned to her seat. No cameras, no business cards, just presence. She wasn't on duty, but to her, it wasn't about the badge. It was about how systems change, one moment at a time. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from a familiar number. Someone from Sky Nova's Internal Operations Board. Short, direct. The memo's live, and so is your name. Maya didn't reply. She simply clicked into her dashboard and checked the flag updates. 7 new cases had opened within the last 48 hours. 2 of them were already self-reported, crew stepping forward before being named. She marked both as acknowledged. That was the power of quiet justice. You didn't have to punish people to make them change. Sometimes it was enough just to show them the mirror. Back in Zurich, Carrie scrolled the memo again, her jaw slack. She reread Maya's name 3 times. She whispered to herself, "I knew it." Just then, her phone buzzed. A group chat of 6 other junior attendants had lit up with a screenshot of the memo and one question. "This is her, right? The woman from 717? Carrie hesitated, then typed back, "Yeah, it was her." And she didn't have to say a word to change the whole damn industry. In Dubai, during a training session for newly promoted first officers, the lead instructor paused halfway through a presentation on international cultural protocol. "Take this seriously," he said, tapping the screen. "There's no such thing as small behavior anymore. If you think no one's watching, you're already on the report." Someone asked, half joking, "You mean Daniels?" "I mean the standards she represents," the instructor replied. "Daniels just made them harder to ignore." At an internal roundtable, Sky Nova's new director of training asked her team, "How did we let this go so long?" One of the senior consultants said quietly, "Because we promoted efficiency over empathy, and the system adjusted." The director nodded. "Then it's time we adjust too." That same evening, Maya was on a short-haul flight to Lisbon. She sat in seat 1A, just for convenience. She didn't expect anything unusual, but halfway through the boarding process, the lead flight attendant approached her. Polite, professional. "Ms. Daniels?" Maya looked up, caught slightly off guard. "Yes?" The attendant smiled, calm and sincere. "We just wanted to say thank you for reminding us that silence is a choice, and kindness is a language too." Maya smiled. "Thank you for saying that." The attendant nodded. "We don't know who you'll write about next, but I can promise it won't be me." Maya chuckled softly and leaned back in her seat. They were learning, not because she demanded it, but because she didn't. She glanced out the window as the last few passengers boarded. The sky outside was pale blue, streaked with soft clouds. Somewhere above those clouds, 100 more flights were happening right now. Some crew respectful, some not yet. But they were starting to ask the right questions, and sometimes that was all it took. Have you ever witnessed someone change an entire system without saying a word? Tell us where you're watching from, and if this kind of quiet power speaks to you. The ballroom lights dimmed to a warm amber glow as the keynote speaker stepped down. A polite wave of applause rippled through the room, followed by the faint clink of coffee cups and shifting chairs. In the back row, Maya Daniels adjusted her name badge, subtle, lowercase, clipped to the hem of her blazer. It read, M. Daniels, FBES Program Advisor, Observer Class 4. She hadn't expected to speak today. She rarely did. But the panel moderator, a woman from an airline partner in Copenhagen, had leaned over during the last session and whispered, "They've been asking about you all day. Would you mind saying a few words before we close?" Maya had nodded once. That was hours ago. Now, she stood behind a podium at the World Ethics in Aviation Forum, facing a room of 300 executives, compliance officers, and training directors from across the globe. No spotlight, no fanfare, just a microphone and a quiet expectation. She began the way she always did, with stillness. Then, "I wasn't supposed to be here." A few heads turned. At least not in the way people imagine "here" should look. She let the words breathe. "I was once a night janitor at a logistics firm not far from where one of you is sitting now. Most nights, no one saw me. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when they did." A quiet rustle across the room. Someone set down a glass. A chair squeaked. They saw the mop, the uniform, the silence, and they made decisions, assumptions, based on what I wore, not what I knew. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I didn't challenge them, not with arguments or anger. I just kept learning. 9 languages, 2 systems, 1 child, 0 shortcuts. She smiled gently. Eventually, I helped design a framework for monitoring bias in flight crews. We called it FBES, Flight Crew Behavior Evaluation System. You call it your quarterly headache. A few in the room chuckled. I've heard all the nicknames. Ghost passenger, language lady, even the woman in 2A. I don't mind. She looked around. Because I didn't come here to be remembered. A pause. I came to make sure the right people are no longer forgotten. Silence. Then, slowly, applause. Not roaring, but real. Afterward, several executives approached her near the coffee tables in the lobby. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a Sky Nova pin, extended his hand. I wanted to say, I knew Sophie. I trained her. Maya held his gaze. Then you probably know why I didn't say her name. He nodded, tight-lipped. You didn't have to. Another exec leaned in. The new behavior policy? We've added it to onboarding, with your name in the handbook. Remove it, Maya said calmly. They blinked. Put the policy in, but not the name. Why? Because this isn't about me. It never was. Meanwhile, back at Sky Nova's Zurich base, Carrie sat at her gate, reviewing a pre-flight checklist. She'd been promoted, officially, just 2 days earlier. Peer lead, international cabin class. Not because she was perfect, but because she'd seen what not speaking up cost. As she closed her tablet, her fellow attendant nudged her. Hey, did you see the clip from the ethics forum? Maya? Carrie smiled. Yeah, watched it twice. You ever talk to her again? Nope. Do you want to? Carrie thought for a second, then shook her head. She said everything that needed saying. In the forum hallway, Maya passed by a large banner with all the speaker names and headshots printed in sharp color. Hers wasn't there. Deliberately, she had asked to be left off. Someone had scribbled her name in pen on the corner of the white space near the bottom. Nothing official, just Maya, 2A. She smiled. Back in her hotel room that night, Maya took off her blazer, folded it neatly, and sat by the window. Outside, Zurich glowed with soft street lamps and distant train sounds. She opened her notebook, scribbled 2 lines. Still don't know what they expected me to be. Still glad I never tried to become it. Then closed it. The final report wasn't flashy. No bolded headlines. No shocking video clips. Just 12 pages, tight margins, clean formatting, and every sentence was a scalpel. Maya Daniels uploaded it from a quiet hotel room in Oslo. A black cardigan hung over the back of the chair. Her tea had gone cold. The sky outside was slate gray, but on her screen, The future of airline compliance was about to shift. The report wasn't about a single flight. It was a 6-week observational series, collected across 4 international airlines, 11 long-haul crews, and 47 premium cabin interactions. Maya had cataloged incidents of subtle condescension toward non-native English speakers, uneven service toward solo travelers in business class, especially women of color, repeated failure to recognize disability accommodations without being prompted twice, and most of all, a pattern of professional politeness masking institutional bias. She didn't name names. That wasn't the point. She logged behavior, timing, repetition, what couldn't be denied. The executive summary opened with a sentence that would later be quoted in 4 industry memos. The danger is not in the visible violation, but in the professional tone that cloaks it. The report was delivered directly to IATA's Global Compliance Board, the CEO councils of Skynova, EastJet, Loomis Air, and Oceanic Blue, and the European Civil Aviation Ethics Committee. It was titled Observational Equity in the Skies, a Quantitative Review of Invisible Barriers. Under the author line, Maya A. Daniels, Class 4, Auditor, FBES Program. Within 72 hours, the response began. First, a joint task force was proposed, aimed at standardizing behavioral compliance metrics across partner airlines. Second, 2 of the flagged airlines agreed to pilot Maya's expanded feedback model, one that included multilingual sensitivity, cultural deflection scoring, and passenger perception mapping. But the biggest ripple came from within Skynova itself. An internal meeting of the Ethics Task Committee was called. Emergency status. Halfway through the discussion, a senior exec put his coffee down and said what everyone else had been thinking. We built a system to measure behavior. Maya built one that measures impact. Meanwhile, Maya walked into a coffee shop in Oslo, ordered a cortado, and sat near the window with no laptop, no tablet, just a pen and a fresh notebook. She wrote, "The system's working, but systems need people brave enough to hold the mirror steady." She tapped the pen once against the page, then turned to a clean sheet. Back in Zurich, Carrie received an internal bulletin with the subject line, FBES Update, Expanded Metrics Model, Phase 1 Rollout. She clicked through, eyes scanning until she saw it. Crews will now be evaluated on pre-boarding tone, language awareness, posture around perceived status differences, and in-cabin micro-interactions. At the bottom, author, Daniels, M. Carrie leaned back in her chair and whispered, "She did it again." At Skynova's global headquarters, 2 junior analysts were tasked with reviewing audit triggers. One of them, fresh out of grad school, frowned and said, "She never writes angry, just clear." The other nodded. That's why it hits harder. Over the next 10 days, training modules began to shift. Gone were the passive HR videos with vague actors and scripted passengers. In came real-world cabin scenarios, AI-driven tone analysis, and a short voiceover at the end of each module that simply said, "Respect is not what you intend, it's what the other person experiences." Uncredited, but unmistakably Maya's words. At the next Inter-Airline Summit, one of the executive directors stood before a packed conference hall and said, "We talk a lot about safety, but emotional safety is just as real and just as measurable." That's the legacy of Report D11. Quiet, unflinching, and overdue. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Maya looked out the window of a half-full Airbus 330. She wasn't on duty, but her mind was already cataloging. The way the crew smiled, not just at her, but at the elderly woman across the aisle. The gentle way a steward knelt to speak to a passenger with a hearing aid. The flight lead who welcomed a mother traveling alone in French, before switching effortlessly to Arabic for her son. Small things. But systems are made of small things. And the difference now, they knew someone was watching, even if she never said a word. At 9:42 a.m. Central European Time, A press release quietly dropped on the International Aviation Ethics Council website. No bold colors, no photo gallery. Just a digital document titled, Adoption of the Daniels Protocol. Sector-wide implementation begins Q4 and subheader. Standardizing behavioral accountability through the FBES model, effective across all global Skynet Alliance carriers. For those who understood the industry, this wasn't just a policy update. This was a seismic shift. Maya Daniels was walking through a quiet terminal in Stockholm when she saw the headline scroll across the corner of a departures TV screen. FBES, from silent audit to international standard. She didn't stop walking. She didn't smile. But she did breathe in a little deeper, because she hadn't built the system to make herself famous. She'd built it to make arrogance expensive. Meanwhile, in an airline boardroom in London, an executive stared at the printed version of the policy, flipping to the second page. There it was, the new name for their internal cabin conduct benchmark, the Daniels Index, tiered scale for professional passenger engagement. No longer optional, no longer whispered. It was written into training manuals, framed on cabin walls, coded into compliance software. The name Daniels now appeared in onboarding orientation slides, multilingual crew briefings, and even in the AI scripts for predictive customer experience modeling. Per Daniels Tier 3, ensure tone alignment in secondary language delivery. Per Daniels Tier 1, escalate all service discrepancies tied to perceived bias. She had become a metric, and that was the legacy. Not noise, structure. Carrie was the first to notice the change from the front lines. She was midway through a flight to Nairobi when a passenger, an older woman in a bright floral headscarf, struggled to understand a customs form. Before the woman could even ask, the new junior crew member knelt beside her and said gently in Swahili, "Can I help you complete this?" Carrie blinked. The woman's eyes lit up. So did her daughters, seated beside her. The crew member never looked up for praise. She just returned to her position like it was normal. And maybe, now it was. Back at Skynova's Zurich training facility, instructors were rehearsing a new simulation module. One scene showed a young black woman being questioned about her first-class seat. Another featured an elderly Vietnamese couple struggling to communicate a food allergy. The scenarios weren't sensational. They were quiet, awkward, familiar. The kind of things most people would miss, but not anymore. Because now, they had a scale. They had a name. That interaction's a Daniels 2.7, the instructor said. Tone mismatch, slight cultural invalidation, no recovery. The trainees nodded. They understood. In New York, a marketing intern in Skynova's comms department was tasked with updating the public-facing website for compliance standards. She paused when she read Maya's name in the source materials. "Is she the one from that flight?" Her manager nodded. "The one in 2A? Another nod. "Is she like a VP or something now?" "Not even on staff," the manager said. "She just changed the industry anyway." The intern didn't say anything. She just saved the file and whispered to herself, "That's the kind of woman I want to be." Maya, meanwhile, sat in a lounge in Toronto, watching the rain beat along the window. She didn't check her name online, didn't scroll through the forums talking about the new index. She was already reviewing a new report, a new pattern, a new crew. Because for Maya, it was never about the headlines. It was about what came next. 1 week later, at the Skynova Global Leadership Conference, the final keynote speaker took the stage. She wasn't Maya. She was a regional director who had watched Maya operate for 2 years in silence. She said, "You don't need to wear a title to set a standard." She gestured toward a slide behind her. It read simply, "The Daniels Protocol, dignity, measurable." Then added, "She never demanded respect. She modeled it. And now every one of us has to ask, would Maya Daniels pass your flight?" The audience was silent. And then, slowly, they stood. Back on a flight to Amsterdam, a young boy handed Maya a ginger ale from the cart. He was with his father, An airline supervisor who had quietly recognized her during boarding but hadn't said a word. The boy smiled and said, "They trained us to be nice to people now, because of someone named Daniels." Maya accepted the drink and smiled. "She sounds smart." The boy nodded seriously. "They say she's everywhere. Have you ever seen someone change everything without shouting, without titles, without permission? Tell us where you're watching from and who you think the real heroes are in your world."